Hello everyone, welcome back to the Winter Warmer Festival for our next set of readings. It's a real privilege to introduce to you, first of all, Emma McKervey. Emma is an award-winning poet from County Down. Her first collection, The Ragtree Speaks, was published by Dura Press, and Highland Boundary Fault, her most recent collection, was published by Turris Press in May 2024. She's been published widely throughout Ireland and the UK and has recently taken part in festivals in Northern Ireland and Scotland. Really looking forward to hearing you read, Emma. So, big round of applause for Emma McKervey.
Thank you. Thank you very much for braving the elements tonight and coming out. Yes, I'm very short, thank you. Braving the elements and coming out tonight in the wilds. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from my first book. That's all right. And this first piece is called The Pithos Jar. It was no mistake, the trickster god delivering speech to Pandora, the hermetic message service unleashed. She may not even have needed to open the box really once a voice was found, as language is a complex thing. Indeed, it is through a mistranslation that the Pithos jar became a box to contain all that Pandora would release, claiming the innocence of curiosity in her defense. Even what was left is questionable in translation. Hope should have been expectation, which is a little less poetic and carries a sense of entitlement, despite the chaos which was set free. It was Diogenes of Sinope who made a Pithos his home, so perhaps satisfaction can be taken from the knowledge it was the original cynic who slept at the bottom of that jar, curled around the only thing left to us, expectation, or sometimes hope, the flame of which lit the lamp he carried in the daylight in search of an honest man. The second poem I'm going to read was actually shortlisted for the Irish Poem of the Year for the Book Awards in 2016. It turned out to be the second best poem of the year in Ireland that year, but I'm sure you don't mind hearing it anyway. It's called Patagonia. I have read there is a tribe living in the mountains and lakes of Patagonia who can barely count beyond 5, yet have a language so precise there is a word for the curious experience of unexpectedly discovering something spherical and precious in your mouth, formed perhaps by grit finding its way into the shellfish, such as an oyster, you have just eaten, or something like that. I identify with this conceptual position. And as I listen to my children debate on the train as to which is the greater, Googleplex or infinity, whilst knowing they still struggle with their 4 times table, I can't help but reflect that maybe we should be on a small canoe at great altitude, trailing our semantic homespun nets behind instead. My son always wants me to do a disclaimer now. He's passed his GCSE maths and is quite competent and knows his 4 times table. So my second book, Highland Boundary Fault, which was published by Turris this year and has a very beautiful cover designed by my husband, is based on an old family story. My mother always alluded to this, some sort of scandal and a court case or something to do with my great-grandparents. And after my mother passed away, I decided to look into it a little bit more. And I discovered that my great-grandfather, Donald MacArthur, who was from the Outer Hebrides, so the Isle of Lewis, which is in the very far north of the Outer Hebrides, had gone to Greenock in the lowlands in Scotland to train to be a shipwright in Greenock. And it's kind of interesting because there's no trees on Lewis, and he decided to go and be a ship's carpenter. Anyway, and there he met my great-grandmother, and then he went back to Lewis, and they were writing to each other. But unbeknownst to both of them, a jealous village girl who was in love with Donald was intercepting the letters and burning them. And this resulted in a sheriff's court case, and forced the Royal Mail to take a slightly more formal approach to post in the 1890s on the islands, as in don't just dump them in the local schoolhouse and so hope that someone will turn up who can read. So I wrote the book based on this, but it kind of diverged off into various mythologies. As you probably heard from my poems I chose for my first book, I like mythology. So I'll start though with a poem called The Arrival of Donald Begg. So my great-grandfather was called Donald. He had an older brother called Donald. So there wasn't just food and trees that were scarce on Lewis. Obviously first names were a bit short on hand. So he's called Donald Begg, which means wee Donald. The arrival of Donald Begg. At the point where the three lochs meet, Donald feels his old life vanish. The island, the croft, which stretches down towards where the Cailleach rests across the moor, the river at Cleesgrow, and the eagles waiting and wanting the lambs. They all go. They are all drowned out by the steam and the smoke. Saying goodbye to the island's silence, he turns towards his new display of metal struts and screeches and screams of metal on metal, and metal uplifted and metal swinging on metal chains out over the Clyde and her girdled skeleton ships. They seem greater than the sleeping Cailleach, who rises over Achmore above the lochs. And no wonder she slumbers, when these great metal hulls are constructed here by man, new great ship women, massive and heavy and mountainous in the dry docks and the slipways, and see how the world bends around them, around their metal weight and metal shrieks, and he will fit them out so beautifully. Donald reaches out, but from the island fishing boat he cannot touch. They dare not even sail the wee lass close, and he is needed at the docks and must ready himself to go. Beyond the hard gleam of metal, Greenock is golden. Houses stacked upon houses up the slope, and Donald has never seen such true and honeyed walls. They rise up like a new sun, and he realizes how hunkered down his life has been. The ships moan and squeal their own berthing. He picks up his bag and steps ashore. Now, Donald's surname is MacArthur, and Art means bear, so Artemis is the hunting goddess. There's lots of, Artio is another Celtic bear goddess, and there's also lots of bear kings and bear gods right across not just Western European mythologies, but right across to Japan. So I started looking into this idea, and obviously King Arthur, who was Scottish and not from Cornwall. He was there. So I'll explain. There was a kingdom of Dalriada, which is North Antrim and Rathlin Island and Argyll in Scotland, and King Arthur was an actual 6th century king of Dalriada. His father was so Arthur McGavin was Arthur, son of Gavin. Then there was Gavin McAden, who was Gavin, son of Aidan. And these kings can be traced back to the Ulster High Kings and then through to the Irish High Kings as well. So I was looking into lots of different bear kings. And also if you're a MacArthur, as my maternal bloodline is, then you're descended from the actual King Arthur. So and also my other grandmother was an O'Brien, who's obviously then we're descended from Brian Boru as well. So pure Celtic princess. Odysseus is the grandson of a bear king, and this is how Odysseus came to be. The birth of Arcesis. When the oracle speaks, a man must listen, and so Cephalus stepped from the boreal temple, braced to embrace the first female he could find, striding out through the trees as any unashamed and honourable man would do, and every confident crunch, every snap of twigs underfoot set the women to hiding. Nymphs faded to peep from shadows, dryads slid back into their bark-like camouflage. Oh, he missed many a chance at a fine and comely fair maiden of the spirit. The deer skittered away before his eyes could rest even upon their dappled flanks. And in the spring morn, only the just awake, Only the still shambling sleep not yet rubbed from her eyes, only the tongue-licking winter-matted fur, only the stomach-rumbling berry hoard lost and gurgling stream searching did not hear his approach, as she thought, with her teeth and her claws. Why should she have an ear out? And besides, who would bother to come suitoring quite so early in the day? There Cephalus came across the she-bear, still stretching and sniffing and blinking from her wintered rest, and he heeded what the oracle had told to him. The she-bear barely knew to shake him off when on-furred hands gripped her shaggy hips, and he began his earnest work. This was a strange and naked beast with whom she would lay and lay again, with whom she would bring forth a son in the depths of her next slumber cave. When she awoke the next spring, she was a she-woman, all fur-shedded, claw-blunted, a maid mother. Her human child suckled her human breast. Cephalus called her wife, took her hand, and walked her from the woods. So my great-grandmother lived in Greenock in Glasgow, and her father was the head gardener to Sir Alexander Park Lyell of Tate and Lyle Sugar. So he had like a very formal walled Victorian gardens to look after and kind of extensive parklands and stuff as well. And she had this quite rarefied and removed childhood for a working class girl in the 1880s, 1890s. So I became interested in flower maidens, sorry, my northern flower maidens, and walled gardens. And so I wrote this poem about another walled garden. It's called The Fall. Adam scratched his head when the apple was offered. Or was it a peach? Or possibly a pomegranate? He wasn't too sure of anything, except perhaps of the way Eve was looking at him, the way she shifted her weight from hip to hip, tucked her hair behind one ear, the upward tilt of her chin as she stepped closer. Yes, he was sure of how that made him feel. Eve had examined this garden, whilst Adam had contented himself with an idle grazing of berries and the occasional crunch of a celery stalk. Eve knew the walls on which she couldn't get perches to hoist herself up to see over, but knew the sky stretched on past those bricks, knew the birds flew out and came back with worms in their beaks, knew the serpent could insert itself into any chink and force its way, had seen it pass through the locked gate. Eve had pressed first her eye, then her nose to the line where the gate met the wall, couldn't see through the crack, but could smell something sharp and bitter beyond, and she wanted it more than any of the endlessly ripe feast. It's too easy here, she thought, too easy. I want there to be more. When the serpent had coiled the tree, she touched its scales first, wondered at its cool, dry self and how it seemed to move even when still, then plucked the forbidden fruit from the stem. So I'll touch on a bit more of the actual story of my great-grandparents. So Donald, brother of Donald, was also called Dan, just to make things confusing even more. And this is a poem about Dan/Donald Begg and Lizzie. It's called The Gannet's Throat Feathers. Dan opened the gate to the garden and we left, pausing at the archway to the mariner's asylum, which announced safe anchorage at last within. Through the bars, the tenants, with their curious rolling gait, are unnerved and unbalanced still at the solidity of earth, and look more dwarfed by the endless walls of their housing than I imagine any man could be at sea, who must remain undiminished against whales and ice floes and heaving straits. Down to the esplanade we dandered, not touching, but close enough that I could catch the scent of island, which held on regardless of steel and sawdust to his father's tweed. To the east, the town, the docks, and Dan's rooms on Blackhall. And to the north, across the Clyde, we look to Dumbarton, with Ben Arthur snowed in beyond. There are stories of ghosts of old kings fishing the Clyde, who don't understand the howl and the filth of the docks when drifting too far from their fort. The Bruce rests on his skiff with a slackened line, wanting the salmon to come. And Arthur readies to seek the Grail a final time. The forest's darkest entrance, now vennels of girders and struts, raging moorings straining against chains, but they return in the dreich of the Clyde to their black rock. We face west on our promenade, where I name the birds, and Dan tells me which are good to eat if the harvest fails. The gannet's throat feathers are the yellow of the rose Dan plucked at the cottage, and I must not tell my father, as they are grown for the vases of Lindora's. I will press its petals between the pages of my prayer book. We watch the bird fly by a steamer, and beyond it, towards the sea. So another mythological character that turns up now and again in the book is the Gaelic, and I think there's a Gaelic mountain down near Cork somewhere. And so there's lots. She's like the winter hag, the chthonic aspect of the actual Celtic goddess Bridget. So she turns up across Scotland and down the Atlantic coast of Ireland. There's a lot of geographical places named for her, and right down, actually, Galicia in northern Spain was originally Califia, which is from Gaelic. So this cave-dwelling, chthonic goddess, that creation, destruction, creation aspect, runs right up the western Atlantic coast. And this one's called Gaelic Sleeps. No wonder she is weary, what with having had a whole brace of kingdoms to build, so many mountains and moors to toss from her creel, and now she sits atop Ben Cruachan by a warming fire, tending the waters which burst out of the rocks there, and all the while holds winter tight in her fist and spring at bay. Then she sleeps, and doesn't know when her fire hisses out, and the stream flows over the cauldron scoop of its lip. A taste of edge, of brink, and the urge and swell to run on, to rush down the Ben side, all the while feeling the endless watery tail of itself drawing up the hollow insides of the earth. She sleeps, and caught in the glen, the water spreads and deepens and deepens and spreads until all but the nose of a holy isle pokes out, fit for the burial of chieftains and the chapels of nuns. Gaelic sleeps till she is woken by her soaked feet, afeared from her dreams that she has been set to wading the seas again. But no, she is here on this peak, and beneath her, Loch Awe. So this one's written in the voice of the letter-burning lass, who I do know her name because I have the court transcripts and everything, but the Isle of Lewis is a small place and people have long memories, so I decided maybe not to use her name in the actual manuscript. And this is called Vanity. Her grandmother had whispered to her when she got her first blood, how the women of the island had once worn colour, bright and of every shade they could find. So they stood out against a suck of moss, and the grey and the green and the grey, always grey, standing out the way the tufts of bog cotton and buttercups surprise on the Macher in July. The new minister had come, witnessed the native vanity displayed, and put an end to colour. And though he is long gone, colour hasn't come back. There is no vanity in the wearing of black, which is the colour of work here and not just of grief. Faded to grey in the places worked hardest and patched with patches of black fading to grey. Vanity is saved for the great on Saturday, blackened and blackened for a Sunday shine, wanting the envy of all the other holy greats in every black house on the island, with Bibles open on each lap, and the soup turning each slice of carrot, potato, turnip for surface show before sinking on a slow simmer in the Cragan. It is said up in Ness, the women piggyback their husbands to the boats so that their breeks remain dry. She wonders if they hoik up their skirts to wade to the moorings and what colour the petticoats underneath. She is taken to looking at the women, watching every tug of cuff and hem, waiting for the slip of colour to show, some flash of buttercup yellow to startle before tucking away what is hidden, accidentally revealed. So I mentioned that the MacArthurs were from Dalriada, or King Arthur, the actual King Arthur. And you can trace his lineage back through the Ulster High Kings and then into the Irish High Kings. From there, records in the Annals of the Four Masters hold a succession of the High Kings of Ireland right back to the Milesians, and there John O'Hart has traced the lineage back through the kings of Gotha and Scythia and into the Old Testament. And finally to Adam, although arguably everyone should be able to trace their line to Adam. And so this next prose poem is based on the Book of the Takings of Ireland, which would have been part of that same lineage. It's called We Are at Sea. We are all in the midst of it. There are young ones with us who have never stepped onto unmoving ground and who know only the constant breath of water. And the water changes. Sometimes it is a great roaring river carrying us with the force of its gulder. Other times it rests, lapping like a cat at her milk against a hull and barely sighing. It changes colour. We are surrounded by murk, whilst in the distance the water shivers crystalline. Or we see straight into the clear immediate around us, see every wreckage in the depths sailing on their own current, and in the very chill, deep, great unknown and forgotten beasts shift and heave their bodies against the weight of everything above. I have words for all of this, as I am of the line of Gaidal, who tallied the 72 languages of the known world, took the form of each version of each word, and found the pure, connecting heart. From this godlike core, all which is uttered now is Gaelic. Before, when a Pamphylian spoke sea, their sea was untroubled and shone like an opal. When a Phoenician spoke sea, their sea opened long paths of currents to journey upon. When Thracians spoke sea, they saw it dark and bringing monsters and war. Now I say sea, and before me the sea holds the truth of all these seas, and upon it our 3 ships sail, lashed together as one. I am the Druid Cachar. I hold all the words which bloom the world on to me. When the sirens rise to sing us to the rocks, I bade the men fill their ears with candle wax, so as not to soften and turn to their keening and mewling. Lafine shines his guiding light from out his hands. He points the way, and I know the words to speak. In 300 years, we will find our home. To Ireland, I say, and the name is right and true on my tongue. I look ahead, when our people will settle on fair land. I look behind. I see the men from whom we come. I speak their names. Their long line follows in our wake, and in the very distance stands Adam at the water's edge. One more. So I'm just going to finish. So when I visited the Isle of Lewis, and the croft is still, my family still lives on the croft, and the croft was founded in 1820 as part of the clearances. So this is a poem about Donald's great-grandmother, who's Annie Moore, Big Annie, and how she founded the croft. Annie Moore MacArthur is evicted, 1820. Their life had been working the land on that dark ridge, facing east at the ledge where the stones held the brink in place. from where the sun could rise between the peaks on the first day of May, when all who are great are conceived. She was easy to turn out with her husband dead, to be replaced by sheep. So Annie MacArthur left her island of the Bear and started over the Macher. The belly of the Cailleach na Montauk shrank from full to lean on her crossing, and all she owned was on Annie Moore's back, her 5 children's backs, trailing the beast and the hens and the cragan. All the while, all through that trudge, through the assembling of rock and bracken to crouch beneath the shelter, the turning of earth, the cutting of peat, the feeding of each of the 5 mouths of her children, Annie Moore could hear the clink of bridle. From her eye's corner catch the flash of armour, the colours of a pennant whipped on the breeze, then gone. The yellow of the buttercup for honour, the white of the bog cotton for faith, the green of the heather for endurance, the purple of the asphodel for justice, the asphodel in the bog for where the ordinary are received. Annie Moore made it there. She bedded in. She made it home. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. It was wonderful. Thank you. The next reader of the evening is Lorenzo Mari. Lorenzo was born in Mantua and currently lives in Bologna, where he teaches English in secondary schools. He's published 7 poetry collections, the most recent of which, Soggetti Cancellazioni, was 2022, and has been translated, some of which has been translated into English and as cancellations. He's working on a forthcoming book collecting and reworking traditional oral poetry from northern Italy, Sardinia, and Andalusia, together with a number of other poets. He's also a translator of poetry, an essayist, a short story writer, and has recently been collaborating with musicians. Warm welcome for Lorenzo Mari.
Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for being there. And this is my first day in Ireland, which is kind of exciting because I knew Cork before from the words of some writers based in Cork or in the Nearby, like Afric McGlinchey is here, which I translated her book. Was 9 years ago or something, or 8, and Billy Ramsell's The Architect's Dream of Winter. So I knew Cork before coming, and then now I'm translating this in my experience again, seeing the city. So it's kind of a mess of things I'm thinking now and experiencing today, listening to the other reading. So I'll pass to the poems which are collected in this Cancellations, this chapbook coming from a larger book called Soggetti a Cancellazione, where the idea is this of subjects pending cancellation. That would be the literal translation, but then it came out as cancellation in the chapbook. And I'll have a short introduction to some of this because there are some references I would like to tell, especially for the first, where I've been mentioning the historical line, which is a play on this different things. It's linea storica in Italian. It comes from a reference to the Italian resistance to Nazi troops in World War II, because we have Linea Gotica near where I live in Bologna, in the mountains, where this resistance was fought, and also to history, of course, and to line as well. And there are some codas at the end of the lines, so they moved from the end end of the line to another place, so they kind of form another poem, so I will read it at the end again. It's very short. So it goes like this. It's nothing more than flat earth, a little like any conviction in poetry, to go on, we say, in the direction of a line envisioned as just. The horizon, for instance, with bell tower, though upside down, scientifically explaining the reason why sometimes we can see the mountains, sometimes not, but it's towards the exact line that we go on, just as the historical line goes on, or the flat earth, while the river water is the background curse, entirely the same. The dead in the historical line have a voice unified, and just only a mirage remains, as if nothing had ever been given up. Cemetery is this, after all, not a choir, especially of pillars of salt, but a whisper, a light nod of the head, a mute assent to dialectics, or to go on scientifically towards the same, given up, after all, to dialectics. If you put everything back in place, the body isn't yet out of place, it sleeps. If you put everything back in place, the house isn't yet out of place, it sleeps. If you put everything back in place, the road isn't yet out of place, it sleeps. If you put everything back in place, the tree isn't yet out of place, it sleeps. If you put everything back in place, the animal isn't yet out of place, it sleeps. It isn't flat, it's a slope. The place isn't an answer to the song, because nothing and no one's called ecstasy or cloud. All is still in place, and nothing yet out of place, not here. So this starts with reference to political issues, which might seem controversial, maybe it is, but I would like to mention things without giving my own opinion or position straight ahead, but working on that with language, maybe pushing it to the extreme. So the word struggle of pronouns against pronouns, to have done with improvised singing. Surely it will be like that, but now they are silence. Vocal rustling turning out to very thin. They are, by the way, well-eaten sirens, encroaching beasts on the seafloor, quite slender in the sea, space in the salt, square far beyond the abyss of evil, where the flat earth ends, and all the crew and the wax earplugs and the cords are at the uvula and on that very threshold of water. The struggle with pronouns against pronouns is not enough. It can't be enough. And this one, the translation is penny pinching for an expression which in Italian is il conto della serva, so it's about money for servants. It's more evident. If tercets and quatrains are penny pinching, adverse system still understanding the step, the verse fragment and the fragment verse, then where they end up, even the penny pinching, how and why. When you draw a line and start again, when you watch and watch again, all of a sudden, write and rewrite, you say and repeat as if an echo. No, boss, it's simple. If you watch and watch again, here it is, here. It's not all here. Then there is a sequence which was called in the book Malco Mix, which in Italian sounds like a pun with the name of the person. I know that in English it's Malcolm X, but to the Italian ear it sounds like a pun. So it's a mix of different perspectives in the family, and the family sequence is not composed. In fact, it goes like, isn't composed, knows that to cut the skin cleanly, to cut the voice, the pattern cutting the strophe should allow the inner foot to cut the legs which are still able to move, shoot towards another step, to cut without dividing the path, to cut should know how to say take the turn, otherwise then above all the noose left by the mother, better to tie the space to the rock, take away the throat to cut in the first place the song, as luckily for her she wasn't a victim, or else she, taking everything, easy turning the corner, turning even in the same place, going back to the space, she better placed the noose to cut better, and she sang, but she got ready anyway, despite the pulping of her first poetry collection, to feel herself free in the general uprising, the general revolt, free of a sudden to cut at a certain point the sentence they said she was always dead. Isn't composed to the brother talking in fragments, but after is filling in the crab, filling in the emptiness in the beehive, and in the broad meadow without even a shred of a contract, talking but not of the vase set back on its feet again and again, relocating a movement of talking and then leaving a silence, oblivious to the father's stroke, talking to a table on a Sunday, any given Sunday, talking three verse or even a wild measure, talking, drawing the cat ear away from the buzzer after all, without argument, assuming a stronger or more elevated tone, talking about defeat, then raising the left hand, talking the left, talking of everything and of a victory, they said. Someone saw it. Then there's a joke I spare you. I translated with automatic translations a speech by Godard during the pandemic in a video he shot in Switzerland, and I just used automatic translation in Italian, and then I challenged my translator in this case, who is Paul Vangelisti, an Italian-American poet, to do a real or human translation of this, but I will pass to the last one, which is also including some cancelled words that I can underline with my hand at a given point. Then it's always from the horizon line, even fled. So what remains comes first with all the remains, stealthily. Entering they enter consciousness, the pixel, the QR code, the publication line, all in HTML code, even immersion. Enters they enter, exits they exit, they enter, exits. But it isn't a 70s record enjoyed by nostalgic riders of the 20s, it's something else. And the consciousness and the horizon line stay flat or takes off to the end. It doesn't glitch, it curdles and calls out, they call. While we linger, surviving little and within, here, with a broken record from the 70s, jagged and broken, we were the 99%. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. I might invite you both up for a quick Q&A, if that's all right. Just a couple of questions. Yeah, so my first question, I'll ask you, and then we can take turns to take the mic. Lorenzo, you mentioned in your bio that you've recently been collaborating with musicians. And Emma, I read on your website that you studied contemporary music in university. So my question for you both is, how have those experiences influenced your work? And yeah, what do you think about the relationship between music and your own poetry? So whoever would like to.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to use the microphone? Oh,
Sure, yeah.
So I studied contemporary music. I played saxophone. So when I went to university, I wanted to play a lot of jazz, but I also played the cello. And then as I spent more time playing, I got more and more involved with like installation, sonic art, and freeform improvisation. And I think that's what's really shaped that ability to listen in a very particular way, that this sound follows this sound, follows this sound, like in a through composed nature of things, that the sounds have to work together. So I think I listen to words in that sort of way as well. And it's also an attitude. I was brought up playing music. I started cello when I was 8, so I would play for hours every day, and you went over and went over and went over to get it right until it sounded right. And I think I've applied that to also that certain doggedness and the pressure of working towards creating something, like moving up to a performance, and then it's over with. It's how I work when I'm about to write something as well. It's that needling away around the edges and then this intensity. So I think it's a way of listening, and it's an inner listening rather than an external listening that I think has informed my writing.
Yeah, I recently collaborated with a musician, but they just written a libretto for music tunes, and they were separated things. But I did in the past also put in the sequence isn't composed of, about this family with another musician, just working towards the same thing together, also on the same tune in that case. And that was the goal of having an idea and developing this from with different codes, but within a single project. So this was the idea of having a core idea to work together. And the last thing connected to music maybe is this project about popular poetry, which is something maybe distant from what I read, but I'm quite interested in it, and it's very close to music in their origins. I mean, the poetry you mentioned in the project, the Spanish one with flamenco, so the text for flamenco, or the Sardinian oral poetry is linked to music from the very origins, and also something from the northern Italy, where I come from. Popular poetry has got this strong relationship with music, so it's always working on that origin, which may be also slippery or dangerous to idealize as the origin of poetry, but you have to work on that to produce something new.
Fantastic, thank you. My other question is about learning and teaching and research. So I know you're a teacher, Lorenzo, and Emma, I also read something you said about the process of writing having two strands for you, like an emotional strand and then a research strand. So I'd just be interested in hearing about your kind of process of research and learning and teaching and how that impacts your work. Who'd ever likes it? Do you want to go first this time, Lorenzo?
No answer for this. Yeah, I've been doing research for some years and then teaching at a secondary school. I guess the point is what you communicate in the classroom, for example, and the communication in the form of poetry, which is not, again, my main goal to communicate things as they are or should be, in my opinion, but to establish some kind of connection with those who listen or participate in it, in the situation. So not just saying something to transmit or to tell people, but to establish a link, and there you can work in that middle point. While my research or things I have studied, yeah, they're part of the process, but never on the front line. I mean, they're useful to think and project things, and yeah, project is a good word I find in translation as well, with an American poet, because projects in English, in American English, I don't know here, because I'm not so good at English as you may have listened. It means houses for working class people. The projects are, I guess, in the United States, the housing for working class families. So projecting, also knowing that projects may have different meanings, and in translation they might mean different things. So not only my project, but what it means outside my text in so-called reality.
I'll wear high heels the next time. Well, for me, I think research is procrastination from desperately trying to avoid sitting down and facing the blank page. But it's also trying, it's definitely that, but it's also trying to find common threads that are going through what I want to write about. And often I don't know what those threads are until I've read a massive amount, or researched archives, or visited places. Like when I was writing Highland Boundary Fault, the Scottish poem, that's all the mythological offshoots, I had these giant A3 pages, or bigger A1 pages, with post-it notes and arrows, and moving things around. And then gradually, because of the research, what I thought was a simple story that I wasn't satisfied with, I was able to find these golden threads and pull them together and find all these synchronicities. And I think that kind of idea of going off down these different offshoots that seem completely random are often very intuitive, and you know what you're doing really somewhere in the back of your head, so that when you sit down to write, the emotional, that process draws together all the intellectual things, but you need to kind of sidestep that. I found that when I was playing music as well. I could learn things over and over and over again, but you need to be able to sidestep yourself, to get out of your own way. So all that information needs to be there, all that research and all that knowledge, and those little connections that are fizzing away. But it's that moment when you sit down and write or play that everything kind of comes together. So it needs, I need both, but it's mainly procrastination.
Great, lovely answers. I mean, I get the sense with both of you that it's like useful and a tool, but then it's not, you can take it so far and then it's actually getting down to the work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
sorry, also you mentioned teaching, and my day job at the minute is I teach crafts to adults with complex needs. So I teach weaving and embroidery and different things like that, painting. And often I think it's been really, really good for me because I struggle with patience for one thing, and I have to be really, really patient. But also it's breaking things down. So I might think that something is clear, and then I try and show someone, and then I realize it's not clear, and that step needs to be broken down and broken down again. And I think that's what teaching really does. It helps you, something that you think is obvious isn't necessarily obvious, and teaching helps you understand what you need to break down and explain better. So I'm done now.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to hear your thoughts, and we'll continue the conversation afterwards, I'm sure. So we're wrapping up the evening. Before we go, another big round of applause for Emma McKervey and Lorenzo Mario. We'll be here all day again tomorrow and Sunday. The first thing in the morning at 11 a.m. is Poetry Films. So see you all tomorrow.